Capcom is one of the many great game developers and publishers of all time, and they've created some of the best series of all time. Series like Street Fighter, Resident Evil, and my personal favorite, Devil May Cry. Wait, hold on.
Devil May Cry. Wanna know the name? Devil May Cry.
Devil May Cry.
The intro to any DMC game gives everyone who hears it an instant erection. However, it would not be what we recognize it today as Devil May Cry without the third installment in the series, Devil May Cry 3, Dante's Awakening. Developed by Capcom, Devil May Cry 3 is a stylish hack and slash that shaped much of Devil May Cry as we know it. It's many people's personal favorite, and many of those in the fandom say that this is the game to start off with if you wanted to get into Devil May Cry. However, I will get into why that might not be a good idea later. I first experienced Devil May Cry 3 on my Switch Lite through the Special Edition, and largely had the same expectations that I had when I first played Devil May Cry 5. However, I was in for quite a treat. The story is set before the events of the first Devil May Cry, where Dante gets invited to a party hosted by his twin brother Vergil on top of the Tema Negru. The Tema Negru is the giant tower that comes out of the earth that Dante and Vergil's father, Sparta, used to seal the link between the human world and the demon world. Dante knows what his brother is planning to do with the Tema Negru, and it is up to Dante to stop Vergil from releasing the seal. The Tema Negru as a plot device just makes me wonder, how many ways are there to open the human world and the demonic world? Yo! Sorry, it's just that once you play these games, you'll realize that there are many ways to open the link to the demon world in DMC. Plot devices aside, and to keep beating a dead horse, the story definitely made the Dante we all know and love. This is where the cocky part of his personality really shines. Don't get me wrong, in DMC 1, he was definitely cocky, but he always felt more stoic than cocky. I haven't played DMC 1, but I've seen the cutscenes, that's kind of how I feel about him, but yeah. This story also introduced some of the most iconic characters of the series. Of course, there's the storm that is approaching, Vergil, but there are other characters that I didn't mention. Those two are Lady and her father Arkham. Lady is a devil hunter hunting her father because he killed her mother, and Arkham is one of those guys that thinks he can handle the demonic power. You know, typical villain shit. My thoughts on these characters isn't really all that much, but they aren't badly written or voiced. Also, fun fact about Vergil, which most of you will probably know if you're DMC fans, he is played by Daniel Southworth, who was a Power Ranger. Anyway, the writing and action in the cutscenes are also really wacky, but in a good way. It's not overly wacky and cartoonish, but it's just enough to be extremely enjoyable, and it's just so much fun to watch. I also want to note that the pacing of this game's story is just perfect. One of the biggest problems I have with my other two favorite DMC games, DMC 5 and DMC 4, the pacing seems to kind of speed up and die down at the same time. I don't really know how else to describe it, but it always manages to irk me. This game's story is just, chef's kiss. That's all I have to say for the story until we get to Vergil. So how does the gameplay hold up? Quick warning though before the gameplay, despite over 50 hours of playing this game, I'm still not the best, and I really don't understand every little aspect of the gameplay. So take what I say with a grain of salt and don't expect anything too good. I'll only repeat this like 6 more times. The central gameplay loop. What the fuck is a loop? The central gameplay loop revolves around you fighting demons and solving puzzles. You'll mainly be doing the former, and the main combat loop is that you perform combos with your weapons and raising your style rank. You have 7 style rankings: Dope, Crazy, Blast, Alright, Sweet, Showtime, and Stylish. Each style rank has their own taunts, which can raise the ranking and affect how your combos perform. Combos aren't too hard to perform, but still require some sort of skill to pull off. Your style rank is based off of the amount of damage you deal, and the variety of attacks, meaning you can't get away with doing the same attack over and over again. As for your weapons, you have 5 melee weapons called Devil Arms and 5 guns. In the main game, you only get to equip 2 of each, which is severely limiting and pretty fucking stupid. In the special edition, though, you get the option of not being limited, which, trust me, is much better and less frustrating. You start off with the Rebellion, Dante's sword that was gifted to him by his father. It's really simple to use and really fun, too. I pretty much start every fight with this sword, but it does have one major downside in that it can't really perform mid-air attacks unless you're using the Swordmaster style. Even then, it does kind of feel piss weak. Also, you'll notice that in all of the footage I have, most of the time when I get the stylish ranking, it's with this sword because I fucking suck at this game. Your next melee weapon is Cerberus, which is a nunchaku that uses ice-based attacks. It does take a little more skill to use and is noticeably more powerful. Like the Rebellion, it is fun to use and is really satisfying to use on bosses as well. Then there's Agni and Rudra, which are twin blades that utilize fire and wind-based attacks. I don't use them that much because I do find them kind of stiff to use, but that does not mean they're bad. I wish I could say more about them, but that's all I really have on them. The hardest Devil Arm to use is definitely Navon. Navon is an electric guitar that fires electric bats at enemies and takes a lot of skill to use effectively. I'm just now realizing that might be an Ozzy Osbourne reference. Anyways, trust me, even in the footage you see before you, I am using the best I can and praying to God that my inputs are working. But even I don't know how Navon fully works. One thing I definitely do know is that one of Navon's moves acts as a great deterrent for demons when they surround you. If you have enough skill to figure out how Navon works, she is extremely effective. From what I've seen, it also gives you a traditional devil trigger where you do away with the guns and shoot shit from your hands. Before moving on to the final Devil Arm, I think now is a good time to talk about Devil Trigger. Each Devil Arm has their own unique looking Devil Trigger, but most of them basically have the same function as a Devil Trigger. Wow, my script writing is ass. Devil Trigger is basically a super mode that gives Dante increased attack power, makes it so that he can't be knocked down, and slowly heals Dante. Each design looks pretty stylish, and it's something I wish stayed in the series, but I'll live. The final Devil Arm you get is Beowulf, which is a pair of gauntlets that do high damage, or, well, as high as possible for DMC standards. They're definitely one of the more stiff weapons to use, but that damage does make it worth it. I should probably add right now that every time I said stiff, I mean they are stiff to use at first. Continuously using them over time makes them much easier to use, and this is definitely something I kind of, one of those things I definitely regret about the script when writing it was that I would say that they're stiff, but when I actually go to record the footage, it's actually really not all that stiff, so. Moving on to your guns, you start off with Dante's beautiful ladies, Ebony and Ivory. They are 2 demonic 1911s, though according to my friend, they look like Browning high powers. They're named after a song by Paul McCartney and Stevie Wonder, though they remind me a lot of Alucard's 454 Castle and Jackal pistols from Hellsing. Designs and trivia aside, despite being canonically different, they both work the exact same way in that they are fast-firing and fire about as fast as you can press the range attack button, making them extremely lethal. I do use these 2 beauties a lot, and I find them to be extremely effective. They're also a nice return to form since, from what I've seen of DMC 2, they are weaker and function how they did in DMC 1. The next gun you get is a double-barrel shotgun, the Coyote A. Is it pronounced Coyote A or Coyote? Anyways, definitely one of the more wacky weapons in thought and design because it's a magazine-fed, break-action, double-barrel shotgun hanging up in a hallway that leads to a strip club. No, I am not joking. It doesn't do a whole lot of damage, and it has to reload after each shot, which lasts no more than a second. Your only demonic gun is Artemis, which is kind of a bow thing? I don't know how to describe it. I've used it about as much as a lot of the other weapons. Actually, no, I haven't. I use it a lot less because I don't really understand how it works, and it's kind of a weird thing to handle. What I do know is that it does some hefty damage, but comes at the cost of a slow-ass fire rate. In Gunslinger, it can also absorb attacks, I think, and rain down a shower upon surrounding enemies. I would show it in action, but I've never been able to get that move to work. Next up is Spiral, and this is one of the more disappointing weapons. It's an anti-tank rifle. How the fucking anti-tank rifle got into an 1800-year-old structure, I have not a goddamn clue. And you'd think that because it's an anti-tank rifle, it'd do a lot of damage at the cost of a slow fire rate. You may be right when it comes to lower ranked demons, but against bosses, it is severely lacking. I used it on Devon once, and I quickly found out that it is about as effective as a single shot from Ebony and Ivory, with all the downsides of an anti-tank rifle. I just haven't found much use for this thing. However, it is basically a cannon, and bitches love cannons.
Bitches love cannons!
Oh, fuck, that's an anti-tank rifle.
The final weapon you get is Lady's rocket launcher, the Kalina Ann. It's a rocket launcher that kind of functions like the grenade launcher from DMC 1. It handles well and is great to use. Unfortunately, that's really all I have to say on the Kalina Ann. I've literally nothing to add. Moving on to Styles. This was the first DMC game to have the Styles system, where Dante can switch between styles. In the base game, you can only switch between these styles at the Divinity statues, which is, again, pretty fucking stupid. However, in the Special Edition, you can use the D-pad to switch between styles on the go, unless you're one of those freaks that use the mouse and keyboard to play DMC games. Fucking heretic. The game starts you off with Trickster style, and this basically allows you to have a greater range of movement. However, the two better beginner styles are Swordmaster and Gunslinger. I don't know any other way to describe them other than the fact that they make you more proficient with your melee weapons and guns, so I think I'll quote famous Devil May Cry YouTuber Zero Needs Coffee on this one. Quote, "The first one is Swordmaster. This is definitely the most useful one and gives you way more moves with your melee weapons. This is basically essential to play the game. Next is Gunslinger. Gunslinger is basically Swordmaster, but for your guns." End quote. If you want a more descriptive way of describing Gunslinger, I would like to ask you a question. Have you ever wanted to use a shotgun like a nunchuck?
What?
I mainly stick to these three styles because of how easy they are to use, but there are three others that I don't use very often. Those three are Royal Guard, Quicksilver, and Doppelganger. Royal Guard blocks and absorbs enemy attacks that you can then reflect back at them. This is a style that requires a lot, and I do mean a lot, of skill to use. In fact, every time I see someone perform combos with Royal Guard, I feel small in comparison. However, something miniature painting has taught me is that I should not compare myself to professionals and just enjoy the craft the way I do it. And you should too. Anyways, Quicksilver basically slows down time, and Doppelganger spawns a second Dante that copies your moves. A second player can also control this Doppelganger, which is neat, but since it does consume Devil Trigger and this gives it a time limit, it makes it kind of niche. All of what I just talked about, the weapons and the styles, can be upgraded. Styles can be upgraded via EXP gained from using them, and everything else can be upgraded by buying upgrades using red orbs. However, they're all very grindy to get and take quite a while to obtain. They're so grindy that I think you can beat this game's story before upgrading all of your styles and weapons, which I'll admit that is a pretty common thing in DMC games, but I think it really does shine here. That's also a good segue into why I would not recommend this game for starting DMC fans, because this game is really fucking hard. It's so hard that it took me about a year to finish my first playthrough. To put it into perspective, DMC 4 and 5 took me around a week to finish on normal difficulty. I cannot stress enough how hard this game is, and there are times when it feels downright unfair. It's kind of an experience you need to have in order to understand what I mean. This game requires your full attention and skill, and you need to be in the zone to be at least okay at the game. The footage may be showing me getting a lot of stylish ranks, but believe me, that's when I feel the rhythm of the fight flowing through my veins and is not how I usually play. The amount of button mashing I have done has quite literally increased my heart rate and could count as a workout. This is especially true for the boss fights, and they can be really frustrating at times, even with the audio cues that bosses give out to let you know that what attacks are coming. Hell, I still don't know how to dodge one of Beowulf's attacks. think it's the one where he flies up and shoots his feathers at you. I'm not doing that fucking fight. If I'm not mistaken and my sources are correct, this game was made this hard out of spite. One of the main complaints about DMC 2 was that many of the problems of the game made it too easy, i.e. Ebony and Ivory's knockback. While those problems were fixed, apparently the game's director, Hideaki Itsuno, likes to be a prick and made changes to the difficulty settings as a little fuck you. To make it simple, think of these changes like this. Normal is hard is very hard is sadistic, easy mode is there to taunt you, and Dante must die is go fuck yourself. In fact, this is what I imagine the development of this game to look like.
How many assholes we got on this ship anyhow? Yo! I knew it, I'm surrounded by assholes.
Keep firing, assholes!
Normally, I'd hold the fact that this was done out of spite against the game because things that tend to be made out of spite tend to be pretty shitty, but I won't here because I can't really confirm this and don't really feel like doing all that research. However, despite my incessant bitching and moaning, I'm not mad! This is mainly due in part to how good the controls are. They're responsive, and while they aren't the smoothest, they're still quite smooth. I feel very in control of Dante and his movesets. I would like to say that there were some cases of input delay, but whenever I actually think back to the gameplay of DMC3, I'm like, but was there really? It's just, so good. If you want my recommendation as to which game you should start off with, I have 3, and take what I have with a grain of salt since I haven't played all the DMC games, though I do plan to. And yes, that does include the reboot, and I already have Peak of Combat. Anyways, since I'm a believer in difficulty becoming harder over time and practice, the 2 games I would recommend the most are DMC 4 and DMC 5, since they're kind of the easiest. If you want to take an evolutionary standpoint in terms of gameplay, I'd recommend starting with DMC 1. However, in truth, I am just stalling for Vergil's part of the game.
Where's your motivation?
Vergil's story mode is pretty simple in premise in that it's just basically Vergil setting up the party for Dante. Now, a simple premise can work wonders for a game. It does well in games like Half-Life, Republic Commando, Doom, and Quake. However, here's one of the single worst extra story modes I've ever played for the simple reason that the gameplay is not all that good. To save you some time, if you're wondering how bad it could possibly be, by the time this review is out, I've most likely not finished Vergil's campaign.
Come again?
Yeah, I haven't finished it, and you may be thinking that I'm being quite unfair because I haven't seen all there is to offer. But my retort to that is that I've seen pretty much everything it has to offer. Because the only difference between Vergil and Dante's campaign is how they control. You go through the same levels, the same bosses, and the same puzzles as seen in the main game, with absolutely no in-game explanation. It may seem silly to bitch about compared to modern DMC Vergil campaigns, like in 4 and 5, except for the reboot, because reboot had its own original campaign, but that's pretty much one of the very few good things about the reboot. But I was quite disappointed when I learned that I had to go through all of the maps all over again. I mean, DMC3's map was good, but it was not that good. My biggest gripe, though, with the Vergil story is that none of the in-engine cutscenes were changed. This means that Vergil's animations are the exact same as Dante's in these scenes. And while they are twin brothers, this doesn't make much sense for Vergil as a character. Vergil is a stoic and pretty much the opposite of Dante, but the in-engine cutscenes were made with Dante in mind. So you can see the problem with this, I think. Moving on to his gameplay, more specifically his combat, it's mostly the same as Dante's except for his weapons. Vergil has 3 melee weapons and 1 ranged attack. For melee, Vergil has the Yamato, Beowulf, and the Force Edge. The Yamato plays kind of like a budget version of the Rebellion. It's kind of hard to describe. The Yamato also has a ranged attack, but I feel like it's kind of hard to use since it requires a very long wind-up time, and it's just not something I could find much use for. Beowulf is the exact same as the one Dante uses, but the handling is a little better. Finally, the Force Edge is basically the same as Rebellion. Not much to say there. For ranged, Vergil has what are called summon swords. These are basically force edges that do okay damage and are slow as fuck. I only have them at level 2 right now, but they're still just so slow that it feels like they have a charge up time when they don't. Vergil's only style is Darkslayer, and it's basically another form of Trickster where Vergil can teleport to enemies. If I had to sum up how he controls, the word I would use is stiff. Well, not entirely stiff, that is how I would use to describe him. I feel like that creates a weird disconnect for Vergil in his gameplay, because when I think of Vergil, I think of someone fast and easily controllable from a gameplay perspective. And not, well, this. If you're thinking, okay, then why don't you just upgrade him? Something I forgot to mention earlier is that upgrades are really expensive. To put it into perspective, some of the most basic upgrades like Air Hike are 20,000 red orbs. To restate what I said earlier, you can finish this entire game story and barely have any upgrades. You can grind to get red orbs, but that is extremely boring and time consuming, especially if you're going through your first run, because you won't have the Bloody Palace unlocked. The Bloody Palace is a bonus mode that you unlock after beating the game, and it's kind of like a wave defense mode. A more accurate way to describe it is that you beat 100 randomly generated floors that have some set enemies and occasionally running into a boss. Bosses are also randomly generated, and this one time, actually I think here's the clip right now, I had encountered my first boss level on this run, and it was Arkham, one of the final bosses in the game, and I couldn't help but laugh. Unlike the modern Bloody Palace modes, you're not bogged down by a timer, even though you are still timed. When I first found this out, I found this to be an unexpected surprise, but a welcome one, to be sure, because some of these bosses take a while to take down. It also allows you to go at your own pace. In modern Bloody Palace, I usually last around 20 minutes, but here the first time I played it, I lasted an hour and 30. Hot damn. However, this does bring me to one of my problems with Bloody Palace mode, and it's that you can't save your progress. If you want to beat this mode, you have to sit down and play it for a whole 2 hours and 30 minutes at minimum. That's 2 hours and 30 minutes that I do not always have, and if you quit, you don't get your shit back. No style XP, and no red orbs. That leads into another reason why I prefer playing in freestyle mode with Dante, because once you have selected your style in the standard mode, you're stuck with it until the end of your run. You'd likely want to get some tunes playing as well, and Devil May Cry does get you covered. I mean, after all,
I work better with music.
the soundtrack was composed by Tetsuya Shibata, who made 104 tracks, most of them being short little horror pieces. Some of the best tracks, though, are the ones that play during combat. I think we all know Devils Never Cry. But I'd like to direct your attention to some of the other tracks. One of my favorite tracks is Cerberus Combat. And its alternate version, both of which have slow beat and menacing tone and lyrics. On the other end of that, you have Vergil Combat 1. Its fast-paced perfectly encapsulates that first fight with Vergil. Your two main combat things are Battle and Battle 2. They're also known as Taste the Blood and Divine Hate, except I'm not sure on that last one because Divine Hate has its own song. It's basically a portion of Battle 2 mixed with a remix of Devils Never Cry. Both work as perfect background music that allow you to focus on performing stylish combos, but I don't think they really give you the motivation to do so, at least not for me. Vergil has his own techno rendition of these two, which aren't bad, but Battle 2 definitely got annoying very quickly. It's strange too because it sounds good, but I think those sudden stops in the song just become quite irritating. However, don't take my word for it because as artistically inept as I am doubly so in music. There are other scores in the soundtrack that are pretty good, but I couldn't give you their exact names because it's all in Japanese. I think I've listed most of my problems in terms of the difficulty, but there are a few more I want to go into a little more detail about. First of all, no DMC game is really complete without an annoying and tedious enemy. DMC 3 has a couple, but the main one I want to focus on is the Fallen Angels, which are just fucking annoying. Not only do they float around and clip through the map, they also have armor and you have to perform aerial attacks to kill them. They can also dish out a lot of damage and just make me wonder who the fuck thought these were a good idea. It doesn't help that you're essentially locked into Swordmaster in order to effectively get rid of these enemies, and these fuckers appear a lot throughout the later levels of the game. The same level you meet the Fallen Angels is also a level that you can easily be softlock if you don't know what you're doing, because it's essentially a whole puzzle. It's... ugh. I'm also not a big fan of the Arkham boss fight. The actual fight itself is good fun, but there are two aspects about it that I just am not a big fan of. One is that a second player can control Vergil in the latter half of the fight, which, again, is neat, but I already said how niche something like this is when I was talking about Doppelganger. My main issue, though, is that I don't like how the style rank system gets changed fundamentally. Instead of being based on damage dealt and variety of attacks, it's just based off of the damage dealt. I don't like it when games change specific parts of their gameplay just for one-off moments, because I don't think it makes any sense as to why they would change the rules so late in the game. My final issue with the game is technically outside of it, and that's how, if I'm not mistaken, freestyle mode is limited to the Switch. Why couldn't Capcom move this over to the PC in the HD collection or the PC version in general is a mystery to me.
Why isn't it possible? It's just not. Why not, you stupid bastard?
Look, I love my Switch because we've been through a lot. But one of the problems with the system is that the buttons are kind of small and do kind of require you to rewire your brain. Also, not everyone has thin-ass hands like I do. Other than those problems, we're mostly good. I counted a total of 57 points, with 41 being good and 16 being bad, leading to a base score of 71.9%. Although I did do a lot of bitching, I had fun, even with Vergil, so that brings the score up to 100%. I think this is one of the worst reviews I've ever written because I don't think I articulated my thoughts on this game very well. I also had to differentiate a lot of my complaints from actual complaints and straight up skill issues. In my defense, I'm not the best Devil May Cry player, and I could not have chosen a worse time to develop this review because my ADHD had moved on and I was finishing up Neon White. ADHD's a bitch, man. Since it's also November, I would like to note that she is defrosting and that it is also Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. I won't get too into it because it can become political in some ways, and I fucking hate politics, but mental health is important to me and I value it. Due to ego and stigmatism, it is very hard for some of us men to be open about our mental health when it is one of the most important things to a person. If you're like me, you can show your support by participating in No Shave November. It's like No Nut November, but you don't have to shave. With that said, have a happy Thanksgiving, and I'll see y'all when I see ya.